Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling the psychological price of generational debt uncertainty. We're going to go way beyond the math, the interest rates, and the loan balances, and really look at what happens to our minds when a generational promise just collapses. Let's get right into it. America is facing a crisis that is way deeper than economics and honestly way deeper than politics. It's about mental survival. And look, if you're feeling this right now, I want to validate your experience right out of the gate. You are absolutely not alone. For millions of people, the constant, dizzying uncertainty surrounding student loan forgiveness has created this daily stress, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion that is just genuinely heavy. This isn't just about money anymore. It's about how we literally survive psychologically day in and day out. For decades, young Americans were sold this very confident promise. It was simple. Go to college, get a degree, work hard, and boom, you achieve stability and the American dream. But the reality, it's a totally different story. Millions of graduates are starting their adult lives fundamentally behind, dragging around this massive anchor of debt. I mean, in a lot of cases, these balances are actually larger than their entire yearly salaries. Imagine trying to build a secure life when you're starting out in a deep hole, before you even have a chance to buy a home, build savings, or just feel secure. And then comes the whiplash, this cycle of uncertainty that literally feels like emotional whiplash. Let's look at the timeline here. Year 1, forgiveness is announced and everyone gets their hopes up. By year 2, bam, court challenges hit. Year 3 brings payment pauses, which is nice, but then they end. By year 4, the rules and who is even eligible have completely changed, which leaves you in year 5, this exhausting, never-ending emotional limbo. It's the constant uncertainty, that soaring hope followed repeatedly by crushing disappointment. It traps millions in this exhausting psychological hamster wheel. So, what does this actually do to our biology? Well, it triggers a permanent fight or flight mode. Now, the human brain is incredibly resilient. Sure, it can adapt to hardship. But prolonged financial uncertainty, that's a whole different beast. It creates a permanent nervous system state where your brain is constantly buzzing with alerts because it doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That means millions of Americans are just walking around, trying to work, trying to live, while stuck in a permanent financial fight or flight state. And that brings us directly to a hidden mental health crisis. Borrowers are dealing with severe emotional burnout, massive sleep problems, and chronic fatigue. There is this visceral fear of simply checking financial accounts. Opening a banking app shouldn't feel like diffusing a bomb, right? But for so many, it does. This emotional roller coaster eventually turns all that exhaustion into complete hopelessness. We're talking about triggering anxiety disorders, depression, and this overwhelming decision paralysis. We absolutely cannot just view this as an individual failing. What we're looking at here is generational trauma. It's a collective psychological burden affecting an entire generation of people in their 20s, their 30s, and even their 40s. When you face this kind of prolonged instability, your brain learns a really dangerous lesson, that nothing is stable. And because of that, millions of people just begin to emotionally disconnect, or they stop planning for their futures altogether. It is a massive collective shock to our societal system. Let's break down the tangible human experiences that are being sacrificed here. Marriage and parenthood, pushed back indefinitely because of intense debt anxiety. Buying homes? Nearly impossible when you lack baseline financial security. People are actively trapping themselves in toxic jobs just to maintain basic stability. And retirement investing is often sacrificed entirely just to manage those current loan payments. So debt isn't just a number on a page. It becomes mentally attached to your identity, and it actively crushes your personal freedom. But here's the thing, it doesn't just stop with the graduates themselves. Parents have emptied their hard-earned retirement savings to help, or they've co-signed massive amounts of debt. Now, entire families are carrying this multi-generational stress together. In fact, financial stress is now one of the absolute leading causes of emotional tension and relationship destruction across the country, especially in immigrant, working class, and low-income families. Education was supposed to be the definitive path out of struggle, right? Instead, unfortunately, they've inherited multi-generational stress. Zooming out to the broader picture, the economic consequences of a mentally stressed generation are severe. Fear basically replaces ambition. We're seeing reduced home ownership and a massive drop in entrepreneurship, which, of course, slows down overall economic growth. There's reduced innovation simply because of widespread mental burnout. Look, the economy doesn't just run on money. It runs on confidence. And right now, a population living in fear just cannot fully participate in economic optimism. Now, contrast all of that invisible pain with the social media illusion we see on our phones every single day. On one hand, you have the public performance, luxury vacations, new houses, expensive lifestyles, where everyone just looks so successful. But on the other hand, there's the private reality: panic attacks, anxiety, and a silent, incredibly isolating financial struggle. We've kind of normalized performing happiness while privately carrying immense stress. Smiling publicly while crying privately deeply damages your mental health. It makes you think everyone else is succeeding except you, when in reality, millions are silently struggling right alongside you. To make matters even more complex, student loan forgiveness became total political warfare. One side argues for economic relief and fairness, while another argues about taxpayer fairness and financial responsibility. But leaving the politics aside entirely, the borrowers are the ones stuck in the middle. For millions of Americans, this debate isn't some theoretical exercise. It determines whether they can breathe emotionally. When politicians repeatedly debate people's survival without providing any stability, it deeply erodes public trust, and it spreads this emotional distrust in our institutions. Let's bring this back to the hard psychological science for a second. Chronic stress from debt anxiety actively increases your cortisol levels, resulting in a damaging cortisol overload. This wreaks havoc on your sleep, your emotional regulation, and even your cognitive performance. So if you are sitting there feeling mentally frozen, I really want you to hear this loud and clear. You are not lazy. You are biologically and psychologically overwhelmed. Your nervous system is simply overloaded. Which leads us to a very poignant question. Why do struggling borrowers blame themselves entirely? Well, we live in a culture of shame around debt, right? We treat it as a personal failure. But remember the context here. We don't let 18-year-olds rent a car, yet we allow them to sign for tens of thousands of dollars in non-dischargeable debt, often without robust financial literacy or any real understanding of the long-term consequences. Yet they suffer silently. They internalize all that blame, driven by a deep, deep fear of societal judgment. Okay, so how do we actually begin to heal? Emotional recovery starts by separating your self-worth from your debt status. Debt is a circumstance, guys. It's not your identity. From there, prioritize your personal financial literacy. Access mental health support like therapy or support groups so you can stop suffering alone. And finally, begin rebuilding psychological control through intentional actions. Rebuilding that psychological control involves some highly practical steps. We're talking about creating monthly budgets, tracking daily expenses, building up emergency savings, even if it's super slow, learning new income skills, and negotiating manageable repayment plans. The absolutely crucial point here is that even incredibly slow progress reduces your feeling of helplessness. And reducing helplessness, that creates the positive emotional momentum your brain desperately needs. Of course, individual actions have to be met with systemic change. Beyond the balance sheet, long-term reform means affordable education alternatives, highly transparent loan systems, better financial education, realistic career guidance, and stronger workforce pathways. Education should create opportunity, not a lifetime of emotional instability. Because at the end of the day, behind every single loan number is a human being. It's a teacher trying to survive, a nurse working exhausted shifts, a parent carrying guilt, a young professional delaying their dreams. If you're watching this explainer right now, your stress, your exhaustion, and your fear are entirely valid in this incredibly complex economic reality. I want to leave you with this final, really powerful thought. Financial hardship can delay progress, but it cannot erase human value. Your life is bigger than your debt. You are not behind in life just because you're struggling financially right now. You are living through a massive generational challenge, and despite everything, you're still here, you are resilient. So what's one small step you can take today to separate your identity from your balance sheet? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep moving forward.